So yeah, when I'm setting up environments, I often like to work in real world scale. And we'll come back to this in a bit, but ZBrush likes to work in 2 centimeter scale objects. So you see here, the like a default sphere, cube, any kind of pre-made 3D mesh in here is going to be about 2 centimeters cubed or square. So that's its preferred scale, and the brush size is kind of connected to that. So if you have something really, really tiny, for example, so if I make this like really, really small, oops, so 0.02 centimeters, so like super tiny. My brush size, you see that's a brush size of 1. I can't make it smaller, and if I just try to slide it up, it's going to radically or rather quickly get quite large. So you often want to make sure your scale in ZBrush, and if the things are massive, by the way, so let's say I set this to 200 centimeters square, right? If you see my brush, I'm at max brush size, and it's still not even remotely visible. There are ways around this, which I'll talk about maybe at another point, but yeah, they're at least at 200 scale, but look how, like, this is my max draw size, and it's 1,000 units. So again, you kind of want to keep your scenes, environments in a scale that's workable for ZBrush. So usually I try to make my smallest object in a whole set 2 centimeters, and then larger stuff can be whatever, 10, 20, 30 centimeters. That's usually still within a good range, but I do want my layout to be in real scale. So this is why I typically layout or block in Maya. So just to get that off the ground, I will typically go to Windows and go to Content Browser, right? So there's a content browser, and in there you've got a bunch of pre-made mesh, and if you literally just click on any of the kind of character human mesh, I'll load the female character this time, this thing will be approximately 6 feet tall. By the way, ZBrush works in centimeters by default. Maya, centimeters by default. I usually do not alter them because when you have a scene and it has units set, if you make something meters in Maya and then you go to ZBrush, it can screw up the translation of that scale. Because sometimes you just list numbers and not that it's centimeters, millimeters. And so when it sends things back and forth, it might be constantly upscaling or downscaling things. So that's something you want to avoid. So again, if I want to check the scale of mesh, there's a couple ways to do it. First way I do it very simply is to go to a polygon object. And then simply, so again, centimeters, right? 1 foot is 30 centimeters. And so a typical adult is about 180 centimeters. Right, so if we just kind of slide that up so the bottom's on the ground, that is about correct, right? That's method 1, just kind of create an object. And not scaling through the scale tool, but scaling through the channel box and really getting accurate. Another way to do this is to go to Create, Measure Tool, and there's something called Distance, right? Okay, Measure Tool, Distance. So then if you hold V on your keyboard, by the way, so V will snap to vertices. Oops. So I'm just going to delete that. So let me go back to that. Creates measure tool distance. Hold V, it snaps to a vertex. And if you left click and drag, you'll see it kind of snap along the surface of the model. So I'll just roughly get to the heel, and then holding V, try to get to the sort of top side of the head. And when you let go, it gives you a measurement. So again, about 180 centimeters, right? So pretty awesome little tool. And then it just creates a locator and kind of a measurement calculator in between. So I'll just delete those things. Typically as well, it's good when you load a pre-made mesh from the content browser, it's going to be facing the front, and that's a good way to start your scene. So yeah, what was I saying? My shots here. Okay, so I've got these. So yeah, I want this kind of like upper floor, this awkward side, and this sort of construction basically. So yeah, we can build the floor just with a simple polygon. Now, if you notice, because of the scale, right, things are super tiny when you create a poly. So if you want to get in the habit of working real scale, I would say You don't necessarily want to build ants at their scale because they'd be, in millimeters. So you can make sure they're at least about a foot big or bigger. Maya as well prefers things to be between a foot, as character mesh, let's say, between a foot and 6 feet. Anything that is misscaled super large or super small will give you issues in terms of physics. If you're doing physics simulation, will give you issues in terms of lighting and rendering, because lighting and rendering is connected to scale. You can build, one of the great things about Maya is you can build massive environments, like kilometers long environments, but they should be in real scale. Like I said, the only exception is when you get down to really, really small or really, really large things like planets and galaxies. That can be brought down to a human-ish scale, or, not true to scale, where you have a, 60,000 kilometer diameter planet, for example, planet Earth. Okay, so I have a little trick to this. So if I go to create and then go to polygons and go to plane, this is a way to sort of create things or have these quick defaults be standard. So I'll say 30 by 30 centimeters. And usually I don't like too many divisions starting with a plane. So I'll just say 2 by 2. And if I hit create, every time I go to create a plane now, just by clicking, it will give me the same thing. And if you want that to be the same way every time you restart, you go to create, poly, plane, and you can actually hit edit, save settings. So that will be like the new default for Maya. Something else I recommend doing, I'm probably not going to use these original mesh anyways, but I usually don't like to scale my objects. I like to go to sub-object mode or component mode, meaning face, vertex, or edge, and scale at that level. By the way, something that is really, I find annoying with Maya is that sometimes when you go to face edit mode, it'll activate anything near it or that you've clicked. So this mesh now also is kind of wanting to be in edit mode. So something else that is very, very useful to do is to create layers and a display layer. So if I say create a new layer, there's 4 buttons. You can move the layers up, down, create a new empty layer, or create a layer with the selected object in it. So I'll say layer. I'll just rename it reference. Okay, hit save. And then if you click the last icon, you can go to T, which is sort of like a transparency mode. Okay, or what I prefer is reference. So it's there, but I can't accidentally scale it, move it, or select it. Right, makes things very, very easy. Yeah, and also maybe I should go back a bit. So I've scaled, but I know I mentioned earlier I kind of want to be accurate with this thing. So yeah, let me just do this again. Rename. Oh, no, sorry. Double click. Okay, so in here under the polygon, I mentioned I want this sort of stairwell because again, in old factories, old industrial buildings, the stairwells were quite wide, most likely because in those places they're either potentially moving up or down big, large machinery, so they had to be quite big, quite wide. And what did I say? 6 feet is, I'll probably make it between 6 and 8 feet wide. I'll say 6, so another 180 units wide. So now I've got that kind of locked in. Okay, so I can just take this back edge, for example, and pull it back. Yeah, there are some tools, like I don't really use them too much, but you can kind of create stairs any number of ways. But one way to do this is to I'll sort of do what I did this morning, where I basically just shift dragged an edge out. So if you hold shift and then move an edge forward, it extrudes it out. And again, I want a kind of decent slope. It doesn't matter if it's perfect or not. And then I'll go to multi-cut. So what I'll do with this is hold control and then middle mouse click, and it's going to give me evenly divided edge loops here. So I can kind of form or create the stairs. I'll have to think about this. Like, think about the step distance too is probably a good idea. Okay, so one trick you could use is to take all of these edges. I'll just hit Q. By the way, W is like select and move. E, right, select and rotate. R, select and scale. Q is just select, which is nice because sometimes I'll accidentally scale things. So shift double clicking. Oops, I didn't want to get the whole border. So I'll just shift click once and then I'll do that edge up here. It's funny, I didn't do this morning, but I'm kind of thinking about it now. I'm like, oh, I could have done it better. So I'm going to go to bevel edge. There we go. Take the fraction like way, way down. Super low. 0.05. Maybe 0.02. Okay, perfect. So then I'm going to take this, double click the bottom edge, and I'll show you why this or how this works. But so those two edges are nearly on top of each other, but now if I pull them down, easy stairs, okay? And I can look at this from a right view, left view, so now I can sort of see, oh, is it kind of wonky or wobbly? What's kind of cool about this too, I might, because I had the similar issue where they're a bit off, a bit warped. I come from a small town, and in the small town there are old factory buildings, and the stairs are always screwed up, right? They're made of wood. Even if you go to the metro, you'll see a lot of stairs made of granite and stone, and they're worn down, right? Because people are constantly walking in 2 or 3 rows, and they wear things out. So it's good maybe for this to be a bit imperfect. So I could still use that sort of template, all right? If you wanted them to be perfect, I'll show you quickly how to do that as well. You just simply double click these, go one by one, and just scale them flat. All right, that's kind of one way to do that. Yeah, yeah. The good thing too is the reference here. To mention this, you want the stairs to be the right sort of scale, because that foot, usually you have enough room for your foot, sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more. So to me, that's, again, scale-wise feels right. There's actually also an architectural rule called 7-11. 7 inches high for a step, 11 inches deep. So usually it's a bit deeper than it is taller, the step. And you probably, knowing Montreal, I'm sure all of you have been in some place somewhere where the stairs are totally screwed up and you're like, I'm going to fall because the steps are too high or too deep or too whatever. Okay, so that's good. That's like kind of the first phase here. And then I know I want this railing. I also like the way the railing is, you know, kind of following and almost like right against this wall, because like somebody built this and just didn't think about what they were doing. I think it feels very poorly constructed, and I think I like that. I kind of like a bit of that chaoticness to this. It sort of helps the environment tell a story too. So by the way, sometimes you may get strange shading. You notice there's almost like no shadows there and stuff. That's because that was a flat plane, and it's sort of like averaging the shadows and highlights. So to correct for this, usually I just go to Mesh Display, Harden Edge, and that will make it much more visible, right? Also, in addition to that, I will turn on ambient occlusion. So anywhere where there's like a little kind of crease or recess area, it will start to give you sort of these soft shadows. Again, it makes it much more readable in the viewports of Maya, right? Okay. So I'm going to extend this edge over. I can probably take out this edge. So anywhere where I feel like I can kind of remove stuff I don't need, I'll do that. And I keep things really, really simple. So I'm going to hold Shift and extrude this over. Shift and move this over. Again, I'm not going to do the stair turn that's in here where it sort of looks like it goes down and then turns and goes down again. I want it to sort of keep going down straight. Now, I'll show you some tricks here. So if you want to extend these stairs lower, so this kind of ends on a flat, right? So I might want this just in case to be a bit deeper. I'm going to go to the poly selection. By the way, you can expand your selection by holding Shift greater than, and it expands upwards. For that to work, your keyboard does have to be an English layout. So yeah, I'll extend up to the top part here. I'm going to go to Shift, right-click, Duplicate Face. I'll say Separate Duplicate Faces. So when I duplicate these and get out of Component, now I've got an exact copy of those stairs that I can extend further down. Now, another trick. D to edit your pivot point, hold V to snap to a vertex, turn off D, hold V and move the whole set of stairs. Sorry, hold V and then move. Oops. What's going on there? V, there we go. It's weird, it's not snapping to... That should snap there. So you see that? Now I'm snapping right to that, so I get an exact location for this, which is great. And so if I select these two and combine them, again, you want to make sure these are maybe closed edge. So yeah, that's where the two areas overlap or touch. So I'm going to just select those 3 pairs of vertices, shift right click, merge verts, and then my way to test if they actually are connected is to do shift expand selection, and it expands into the rest of the mesh perfectly. So that's good. Now in reality too, I sort of, when you're building this layout, technically I think the floor will just be this big polygon. I would probably detach the stairs from this. So I will shift click on these parts and then go to shift right click, extract faces. That means that these will be separated, and I'll make sure that it's set to separate. So then this becomes its own object, object 1, object 2, okay? Sometimes Maya will create these like subgroups. Usually I will just go in and go Alt-Shift-D, and that deletes the history. If it doesn't get rid of that grouping, I'll simply pull it out of there. Because when I try to send this to ZBrush via the one-click kind of setup, which is beautiful, those groups can really screw things up. Plus, the history can get very heavy and make things a bit buggy in Maya. Okay, so next up, again, I kind of build things off of one another. So by that I mean, let's say I want to build this sort of wall over here. So I'm going to, where does that come from? Yeah, let's say like this. I'm going to hold Shift and drag up to make the wall. And again, I'm going to grab these two and extract that. So it's going to be its own poly. Go back into face, grab this one face, hit G to repeat. So now I've got one wall here, one wall here. They're not connected. You want them floating. So much like a set, right? One of the reasons films are shot on sound stages and in studio spaces is that you can't get the exact camera angle you want without knocking down a wall or tearing something out. Here, this is like, we can just take that out, right? You can just hide it. The other beautiful thing is in Maya, under shading, there's something called backface cull. If you turn that on and you have a flat poly like this, you now can also just see right through it. Also very nice, right? Now if you want, you can kind of force the wireframe on so you know that it's there. That's cool, but it's really, really powerful. So you can kind of like, yeah. There's another way to do that, obviously, through templating and layers. Yeah, question? Yep, it's just in the viewport menu, shading, and then turn on backface cull. Yeah. Now, the other thing I mentioned I like to mention as well is that if you happen to have windows and stuff, people will do I saw somebody do booleans and stuff. It's terrible. Very messy. It's very simple to just kind of work in this mode. So if I go to, let's say edge mode, I'll go to multi-cut. Let's say I want to put a doorway here and then maybe a window over here. I'll just keep it this simple. So then here I would just delete that for a doorway. If I wanted to make a window, if I'm doing a bunch of them, I'll just show you that. So let's say I have a couple of multi-cuts and have some tiny windows here. Just keep the edges flowing evenly throughout. So take those, shift click the 3 edges, go to bevel, so you'll have consistent window spacing. Increase your fraction, let's say. Then you take these 3 and delete them. Windows, doorway. Then you can take the whole mesh and say extrude, give it a thickness if you need a thickness or a depth. Okay. If it's just a flat wall, you can keep it flat. So that's nice. So in my case, I just need the simple kind of super low poly mesh. That's fine. Yep. Yep. You can click a loop like this to bevel to kind of give it a, so for example, let's say these 3 edges were going to be windows. To keep them, if they're going to be the same width, then I can say, okay, let's give them a fraction, which is equally kind of beveling them, right? So then become like the same width of window, right? Cool. Yep. Okay, so yeah, I'll just, it's fine. I can leave that with some edges too. That doesn't matter too much. Yeah, so I kind of like this weird awkwardness of, of this corner. It's very claustrophobic, so it sort of fits my film concept well also, right? This sort of, the character wakes up from a nightmare of something happening, and then there's a creature stirring in the darkness down below, and it's this tight corridor um, that separates her from downstairs and where she's sleeping. So I do kind of think about the mood, the kind of intent of the shot, and everything I'm doing is to sort of reinforce that mood. So I'm going to keep this very sort of tight. I'm going to go to extract this as well. So again, I'm just templating off of everything I've already done. Let's do this. So again, it's very, very primitive. So anything I do, I'm not going to model in excruciating detail. I'll mainly try to use primitives. Okay. What a shading. We can also do, yeah, let's see. Flat shade. No, that's fine. Smooth shade all. Okay, so we're getting down into this area. So I think for this wall, will I continue it down? Yeah, I'll probably continue it down. Yeah, and you'll see this, right? If you ever look at behind the scenes for films, TV shows, you'll see the sets are just like almost like modular walls they can slap in and rearrange. So again, I do want there to be maybe a flattened area. So I might, yeah, just take these two edges here and do a connect. So it creates a connecting edge. Kind of dumb luck that it's almost right there. I might lower it a bit and then. So you can connect or you can use multi-cut. Sometimes I use connect because it's also very accurate and very precise. Yeah, so yeah, maybe I'll just take these faces here and I'll shift drag them back. So you'll see what happens. It kind of creates this awkward box here. So I might just delete these polys that are being created on the sides, except for this underhang. Yeah, I'll just delete that for now. So this is where I'm going to start to figure out what's it called? The camera. So I'll take this. I'm going to maybe shorten the stairs again. So I'll just take this, delete that, double click this, delete that, and then take this edge over here, shift drag that out, quick extrude. So usually what I like to do is start to figure out the camera. You don't have to avoid the camera lens here being 35 mil. I would suggest that you actually switch it to at least something else like 30, 28. They're very standard preset lenses. So you have to determine, is a wide angle lens better for what you want to do, or so wide angle lenses, as you see, can exaggerate the depth in the scene. So the wider you go, and I'll go crazy wide here. Not that this is a lens you'd ever. This is almost like fisheye, right? So you see, like, as you get close to the character, they get more distorted, right? This extreme kind of wide would be used for something like a psychedelic or out of state, out of mind type situation. Usually, like 16 to 28 is like 28 to 35 is landscape lenses. 16 to 18 or 20, 21, those are typically like, yeah, again, just basically wide to extreme wide. And then your sort of human field of view is 35, which is why my default's the preference, the regular camera to this. 50 is more like portrait type lens, so it's good for when you're in close up, medium close up on a character. 80 mils and above is basically like, yeah, more of a standard Hollywood lens. What happens if you notice this is if I go from 18 to 80, right? 80 flattens things. It makes the space actually feel much more condensed. There are a lot of times where super lenses are used, like super zoom, like 100, 120, 150, 200 mil lens. Sorry, let's take a look at this telephoto versus zoom lens. And it sort of does a couple of interesting things. So I often like to work wide because I think I like that kind of fake sense of, or the exaggerated sense of space and perspective. Sorry, let's just go. So I'll just take a look at this kind of quickly, right? So there's 145, and it zooms in too. So right, the higher the millimeters of the lens, the more zoomed in you are. And so what happens is if you want a wider shot but with a telephoto, you'll just move the lens way back. So that's another reason why, if I want this like really like cramped feeling looking space, right? Now the bottom of the stairs feels much closer, right? It's very unsettling. So I find for first person shots, wide angle lens, right, is better point of view shot. And a lot of times dialogue stuff is like kind of 50 to 80 mil. This morning when I kind of did this, I preferred the sort of, this kind of wider angle because it kind of made the character feel a bit smaller in the space too. The space feels bigger because it is bigger with that lens, right? So you got to think about the context too of the lens choice. Okay, I'll just maybe move this thing out too because I think I wanted a bit more space for that kind of weird, creepy closet that's in here. So yeah, I'm just kind of moving some of the border edges around, right, to get this in. Okay, so what I'm going to do with that, I'm going to go to View, Create Camera from View, and then I'll switch back. I'm going to go make sure I'm just back in the perspective camera. Rename your cameras, by the way. Start renaming stuff as you build it. So for this, I'll call it cam_sin for cinema. Okay, so what am I in? Oh, by the way, if you move your cinema camera by accident, you can hit Alt-Z and it undoes camera moves. So I'll go back in here and go to perspective to make sure I'm just in the perspective. And I'm going to go switch back to the default sort of 35. Again, try to avoid the default Maya camera for an actual... sorry, let me just select it first. There we go. 35. So yeah, just when you're working around, 35 is fine. Yeah, so let's say for the railing, these they're called newels, these kind of thicker posts, and then the banisters, I forget. Again, I don't even have to do the full thing. I'm literally just going to create a cube. That's fine. So this one is about, how big is it? 10 by 10. I think I want these to be not a foot because this is industrial scale, as I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to make it like 20 inches. So it's like 2/3 of a foot. And then just one poly each. Again, I don't need any detailing yet. I just want the, oops. So I'll just pull this up. Again, I'm going to go to the right view. Usually these things are kind of at or about waist height, right? So that's sort of where I'm going to go with that. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but... So that's all the blocking is. It's just really, really primitive modeling or primitive objects. And I'll space this out a bit too. There's like 1, 2, 3, maybe like every 3, 4, 5 feet. And you can be accurate with this or you can be very rough. So if you move an object, it clones it. If you hit Control D, so let's try that again. It's very particular, this tool. So if you shift drag, Control D, sorry, try that one more time. Shift drag, and then I think it's actually Shift D. We'll duplicate it the same amount. So I can kind of do, yeah, there's only one down here. So I'll just kind of put one at the bottom. Okay, and then for the little kind of like railing part here. Yeah, I might actually just move these over a little bit, or maybe just these two. Because the railing has to kind of come out in front, and then... Again, I like these awkward little spaces. It's like it's poorly designed. That is in the same location. Okay, so I'm going to grab this. Shift drag, because I want to keep these in line with each other. Or did I? I can't remember. Sort of. That's okay. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect for me, so I'm going to go and leave that like so. All right, for let's say the in-between parts, I will, yeah, by the way, I'll start adding this stuff to the reference layer, and anything that's in this kind of grouping, subgrouping, a lot of this stuff you can just go select it, Alt-Shift-D, delete history, and then anything stuck in a kind of group, subgroup, just make sure you kind of pull those things out. So middle mouse click and drag out, And then you can delete these groupings. Because I created one thing after another from these objects, so let's just rename this stuff too. So again, it's good to sort of say like set or interior. I'll just say set underscore floor. Set underscore, wall, whatever. I'll just say underscore 01. Copy that. 02. Grab this one. 03. Okay, so what else do we got here? Set underscore stairs. So now, like, if you're just looking for something, you just go set. Bam. If it's character, it's CHR. Type in CHR, bam, done. Rig, of course, RIG, right? If I go cam sin, I know where my cams are, right? Oops, did I delete something? Okay, so that's the stairs. So yeah, then like I said, we can just kind of select most of this stuff right now and right click, add selected objects, and then we put it into T reference, let's say, for now. Yeah, as I was saying, let's say for this stuff, I will grab this, shift, drag a copy, and then I'm going to go into face mode, double click all the faces. And I love this about Maya. You can kind of scale on 2 axes. So you keep the height the same, but then you kind of create a narrower version of the object. I still might just narrow it anyways because there's probably the railing. There's usually a gap around these things. Okay, and then I'll do kind of something similar where I just shift drag and then shifty. There we go. So again, that's just kind of again, these are not renamed. I'll show you how to rename that quickly in a second, and I'll shift drag. So again, doesn't have to be perfect. It's all just layout so that we're just kind of getting a feel for stuff. I'll deselect these, and that should leave these other ones behind. Perfect. I'll just maybe move one over and then delete the other one that's not being used. Slide it over. Okay, so I'll show you another another tool that I use a lot. So for this, I'm going to go to edit, duplicate special. And what you can do with this is actually sort of make a bunch of copies. So let's say, I know this thing moves kind of in one direction. Let's say 60 units and then like minus on Y, minus 11. I think from earlier, I know it's like 10 maybe, 10 or 12. This I usually do with trial and error, but if you go apply, there you go. You start to get that railing moving down. So I'll undo to kind of go back, and then you have this move out like 14 units. And we'll make a bunch more copies, like 30. Apply. That's not too bad, right? Now again, this is a little trial and error if you're doing it by hand, or kind of, you won't be as lucky as this getting it in the first couple of shots usually. But yeah, I'll maybe drop the number of copies. Okay, undo. Do 28, and then I'll maybe tweak the drop here. Let's say 13.5. Let's try that. 13.5. 13.8. So it's really close. Well, maybe that's not it. Yeah, I'll just tweak that back to 14 then. Yeah, I mean, I think that's not bad. I'll say it's okay for now. Okay. So I'll show you some other tools that we can use for renaming. So what we can do is, let's say, You can grab all of these. For now, let's say I'll go to, yeah, I'll maybe deselect these kind of newel post things they're called. Oh, they're called balusters, the little sort of, the smaller parts in between the major newel posts. So I'm going to go to edit, modify, what's it called? Search and replace names. So in here, it's already got p cube, whatever. So I'll just, and you got to do it, if it's capitalized, you have to be capital sensitive or case sensitive. Replace that with stairs underscore balusters, and then underscore, say selected, apply, bam, done. Okay. And then those other ones, I'll select those four. So we'll say p cube. Again, I can just use that. These are called newel posts. So I'll just say newel. Apply, that's done. Now, something else that's interesting I want to mention is that let's say you have this, and because I made them copies, let's say I wanted to edit them all at the same time. Well, I have to do them one by one, okay? So I'll show you a trick, a couple of tricks. One is to sort of, instead of making copies of these things, let's go back here. So yeah, let's say I grab this, for example. I'll go to edit, duplicate special with the options. Instead of going to copy, you can go to instance. Hit apply. So now what happens is if I'm editing one, they all get updated at the same time. Okay, so now if I do something like this, for example, bam, all done at once. Yeah, so if you're doing duplicate special, you just have to make sure you go into the options for duplicate special and turn on instance instead of copy. Okay. Now, another thing I'll show you as an alternative to this, if you want to convert these into copies, right? So I'll grab all the balusters that I've got. And if you go to modify, replace objects, you can switch these to instances, hit apply. Now, if I edit one, they all update. So modify, replace objects, go to the options box. So what's awesome about that? Well, you make one complex element that repeats a bunch. You customize it, you edit it, you unwrap it once, not dozens or hundreds of times. Yes. So as long as you have a selection, I think it's I can't remember if it's the last one or the first one replaces it. So let's say even if I had, let's say I wanted to replace, yeah, I'll take all these baluster things again. And then I think it's the last selection. Let's say I add this guy. Go modify, replace objects, instance. It becomes that instead. So what's cool about that is that you can even in the same scene or in a separate scene be modeling on a really detailed custom thing, bring it in. The only thing I'll mention is that the pivot points all have to be the same. So that's something you have to be aware of. They should all have the exact same pivot. So for me, as a rule of thumb, when I'm modeling as well, I use this thing in the bonus tools for Maya, but if you go to modify, 0 pivots, move pivot to base and 0. So basically, yeah, I should have done that before, but that's okay. This will be fine. Okay, so that's a lot of individual parts, right? So in a lot of cases, what I'll just do with this ultimately is, instead of renaming this, if I kept it this way, fine. But if I decide to, I can, because like I said, ZBrush does not like grouping for Maya super well. So I often will just kind of combine these things ultimately. So you can just combine them. But just keep in mind, you can combine things, you can detach them, you can rename them, replace them, and then go back again. So there's never a way to not do something. And I'll delete any old groupings that are created from that. Okay, so let's go back to reference. So I'm in reference, meaning I can see the stuff now, but I'm not able to select it. So I'll just rename this stairs, or set stairs maybe. set_stairs. So this naming idea is that you go with the largest, widest category possible and then get smaller and smaller. So set, stairs, and then, right, then the name after that would be the posts, the balusters, the railing, right? So set, stairs, railing, set, stairs. Okay, you get it? Oops, do I have 2 sets? Oh yeah, I guess this is, yeah, not the, what am I doing here? Okay, railing, and then I'll just right click, add that, add selected. Yeah, next up, I'm going to get out of reference actually and just make things editable again. So what I want to do is build this creepy kind of half like sort of small wall office type thing. So I'm going to basically double click on this or grab these, shift right click, duplicate face, click away, and then click back. And that's our new kind of micro wall thing here. Slide it over, shift drag it up. Now, often too, I should mention this as well. Let me just solo this. I'll go to object mode. Control 1 is solo. Because I dragged this up as an extrusion, these faces are technically inside out because it's sort of like, so it's kind of a broken mesh already. So what you want to do is kind of keep track of that stuff, or if you're going to do any kind of wall thickness, maybe just stick to verticals. But yeah, one way I'll just show you quickly to fix this is to grab these 2 polys, go to mesh display and reverse the side that they're facing. Now it looks solid, right? It's kind of hollow as opposed to hollow. But yeah, I'll just flip my selection around, delete that. Okay, and then as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to just slide this over for that kind of awkward door. Bevel. Again, this looks really wide. So I'm again looking at my human scale reference to kind of get something that's, you know, kind of real world proportion. And then I'll grab all these vertical edges, and from a right view, I'm going to just set that. I'll go to connect and slide that up. Again, so she's supposed to be a bit of a kid, so I should probably make her height a little bit smaller as well, but that should be fine for my door. And then I'll go to face and delete that face. And then for here, I can just literally, right, either shift drag or hit Control E. Control E is usually a little bit safer to give it a bit of a thickness. Okay, let's go to object. Yeah, and by the way, if your pivot points are all wonky and weird, you can kind of, I often will just grab a bunch of the stuff here and go to modify center pivot. So that way, you know, your wall has a central pivot for moving and that sort of thing. Let's go back to the SynCam. Right, so we're getting this, yeah, definitely a good sense of creepy claustrophobia. And by the way, always good to kind of do like tear off a copy, so you can kind of keep a floating thumbnail. And we should also turn on our resolution. Sorry, where's that? Resolution gate. So this is already probably in HD. If this gives you that kind of white cropping, usually what I'll do is I'll go to the SynCam and then go to the attribute editor, and under display is a little setting called overscan. I just want to set that to 1. So I'm really getting the full view of that. I don't like that kind of cropping in that it does. This is sort of half HD, but it's still the same proportion, and that's really what matters for the you know, the camera setup, the render, and all that kind of stuff. So, so again, another thing too, if your character is often facing, is in the frame either with their back or face towards the camera, where they're facing, there should be open space. So in this case, I like this awkward camera angle for one particular reason, is that there's like a vulnerable spot to her right with this creepy open doorway, and then there's something unknown downstairs. I'm not necessarily sure she's going to be in the shot like this, but it definitely gives me a sense of like multiple areas of unease. And again, I like that there was this kind of strange sort of short height to this wall. So I'm going to drop that down, and hopefully that'll kind of catch in frame. Yeah, very, very, you know, I'm sure maybe you've been in renovated stores or weird, you know, you can be in certain areas where like, this is a strange setup. Why is this like this? You know? So that's kind of interesting. Um, yeah, before I kind of wrap up this portion, I want to talk talk about one more thing, which is the sort of camera composition. You've all heard of rule of thirds, right? You've probably heard of triangular rule of thirds or other compositions. There is a really great tool for Photoshop that I use called the golden ratio crop. Let's see, SourceForge, I think it's on. It's really old, but it still works, which is kind of nice. So yeah, if you Google enough, I'll probably include or save a link to this because I love this tool and I don't want to lose it. But let's go to Photoshop. I'll mention one more thing. I kind of cheated a little bit. Again, I really love kind of classic cinema, and there is HD ratio is 16:9 ratio. Okay, but there are different sizes of frames for film and TV. This is the dominant one now, is a 69 ratio. 4:3 used to be classic old school tube TV, and ultra wide is very common for like cinema. Usually for epic films, things are shot this way, but a lot of films I find are still shot in somewhat comparable to this ratio. So you can save 10 to 20% of your render time by going 1920. We're set to something strange, like 1920 by not 1080, but like 780 something, I think it is, or 880 something. So, and that will affect your shot. So if you are doing that, I'll show you this under the options here in the render view. So if I scroll down, this is your preset. Right, there's full HD, 1920, 1080, HD 1080. I'm not sure if they actually have the cinema widescreen. Yeah, I'll just go back to the HD standard for a second and then yeah, there's a ratio calculator too. Do I want the, yeah, let's see, ratio pixels. Go by pixels too, calculator. So yeah, if like I said, I know my maximum width is usually the one I have to hit. So if I go to CinemaScope, which is that 21 by 9, if you set this to 1920, it's 882 or 883, let's say. So if I go 1920 by 883, and then say maintain ratio, close. Let's go back in here. Oops, sorry. Yeah, let's go back. 1883 by 1920. Okay, close. And if I have to reset this, I'll just simply select the camera again and go back down to display and reset the overscan to 1. Okay. So now you've got that much more kind of like cinematic ultra wide view. Yeah. Okay, sorry, going back to the script, I'll download this thing. It's very, very simple and easy to run. So I'm basically going to just unzip this thing. And then I will copy this, go to Photoshop, create a new file, and I'll quickly jump to film and video. So usually it does have like the preset, right? 1920, 1080. And I'll make my own custom, right? 1920 by, what was it? 883 I'm using, 883. So I'll just hit create. So it's in this framing format, right? Kind of ultra wide CinemaScope. And for that script, all you have to do is go to File, Scripts, Browse, paste your location, double click the file. I'm going to say all golden spirals and the triangle. Usually I'll increase thickness a little bit. So what it's going to do is basically give you every kind of like major type of compositional guide, okay? It'll say, do you want to crop to canvas? I'll sort of say yes, and then I'll undo, and it should kind of get you back into a normal sort of template or layout here. So for this, we can just, I'll just turn them all off and then kind of go one by one. So, right, there's kind of spiral moving in this direction. So you can kind of have your focal point be here. And then let's say, yeah, maybe on a blank, maybe I'll do a new layer here. So you can kind of like have things kind of come out from that point of view, right? Whatever. This is very bad drawing, but right. So you can decide, oh, I like that, or maybe it's sort of close to what I'm already working on, right? So there's different directions for those spirals. There's other sets. So that's the golden ratio. It's basically like a mathematical formula that gives you a division of a frame. So this is a triangular version that you can use as well. Again, I feel like my composition, if I jump back for a second here, is very close to this, right? With that sort of stairwell and doorway. So not that you have to follow these, but it can be a useful guide. And you've done the standard rule of thirds, right? So this is rule of thirds with that ratio, either the compressed ratio or evenly divided thirds. So there's two ways to see the rule of thirds. And so again, diamond composition too, very, very interesting kind of central diamond. And then again, these kind of different triangles. So I'm going to use this one, I think. For this, I usually just kind of create a simple, quick collapsed version of this. So to make a kind of flattened version of all the layers or what you're seeing, you can hit Alt Control Shift E. It's a big shortcut, but if you hit that, it makes a kind of flattened version of this. I'm going to hit Control U and basically desaturate this. Yeah, I'll leave the darkness alone. I'm going to hit Control I, which flips this around, and then hit, what's the contrast? I always forget the contrast one for some reason. Brightness, contrast. So brightness, contrast, crank them up. You can also go legacy, which really gives you an extreme, but yeah, in that case, you just go full contrast. So then I'll hit Alt Control S to save this. Save it as a PNG, probably a good idea. And I'll name this framing underscore guide, let's say. Again, a good idea to start putting these things into your project folder. I don't think I've set that up yet, so for now I'll just save it in the main folder, and we'll talk about kind of project setup in a minute after we take a break. So just going to short film for now. Hit save. Yeah, so before the break, I'm going to show you my last kind of trick that I use for this. So I'm going to go into with the camera selected, go to View, Image Plane, Import Image. And I'll find it under my, where is it? Film, there we go. I'll just copy and paste the link because again, I don't want to go searching always. Framing guide, open. So you can just drop the alpha gain down, and now I'm going to just maybe tweak. Oops, that's in the wrong camera, by the way. I think that's on perspective. So I'm going to just undo that and yeah, make sure I'm looking through the actual SynCam here. Sorry, go to View, Image Plane, Import Image. Paste the link back in again. There we go. Then we can just drop this down. So now I think I do want to maybe sort of tweak this. The other thing too is like a high angle camera will sort of tell you one thing about the shot, and a low angle will tell you a different thing about the shot. So just keep that in mind, is that, you know, looking down on a character is assuming a god-like position, you know, being eye level is equal, and then being low looking up, again, puts the camera in a subservient either dog's eye view or ant's eye view, which again is sort of a very kind of dominant position. So again, I think I want to be able to sort of see the silhouette of something coming around the corner or coming into the space. And so again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to line up perfectly, but I kind of like this kind of composition, right? And so our sort of focal point is here. And also we get a sense of maybe there being something else happening potentially there. Okay. So again, very, very useful, I find, to have that kind of overlay in your shot. Yeah, so I'm going to save this, and before I do, I just want to do my set project. Always a good idea, so I'm going to go to set project. Again, I'm going to just locate my folder. So let's go to D drive. Oops, D drive. Go in here. My models, short film. So I'll go to my set interior and I'll say set project. Another good thing to do is you should move probably your image plane in there as well. So if that, once you start pulling in references and maybe even having sample textures and stuff, you want to put that stuff in here. So anytime you're going to grab a file, it's going to wind up being in the, let's see, sets. I'm going to make sure I'm in here, set project. Let's go to project window just to make sure it's actually locating things correctly. Set project. Project window. Usually you want to just hit new and accept, and then if you go back into your actual window here, we should... Oh, sorry, I think I just did this by accident. Sorry, go back to set project. Let's make sure that's actually in the right folder. Okay, so I'm going to just make sure all these folders are in the right location. Okay, and then I'll save this. I'll just go to save as or save scene, and usually I want to save an MA, and I'll talk about that in a bit. So I'll just finish this saving. Interior stairs, that's good. Yeah, just to kind of be tidy, I'm going to move, like I said, that image I had into this folder. So let's cut that out of there. So yeah, you want this under images. So again, I'll go back to SynCam, then to image plane. And image. If you click on this, oh, sorry, it should be under source images. I always forget that. Source images. So I'll just put that in. So what's nice is if you put references in, textures, if you put them in the right folders, then they're just going to be there when you click to open them, right? So again, I'll just hit save.